Welcome back, guys. Another day, another Miata comparison. Today we're comparing what I believe to be the best value of all generations and trims of Miata, which is the NC1 Miata, and we'll compare it to a fully loaded brand new ND3 RF Club, which is basically if money is no object for your Miata and you want the absolute best experience from the factory. So we're currently sitting in a 2024 ND3 RF Club, and this car has an MSRP of over $40,000. You can pick up an NC1 like that 2008 model year next to us for about $10,000 in good condition. And let's say you throw around $5,000 of mods at it, and you have still barely over 1/3 the price. So is the new Miata 3 times the driving experience and 3 times the car? So Eric, the owner of this ND3, has barely put any miles on it, less than 3,000, and it's completely stock. Powered by the 2-liter naturally aspirated inline 4-cylinder engine, 181 horsepower, 151 pound-feet of torque. In RF Club trim, this car should weigh around 2,450 pounds. We have double wishbone front suspension, multi-link rear, 6-speed manual transmission with a limited slip differential, electric power steering with a revised steering rack for the ND3 generation. I did confirm to be the case when I compared this against an ND2. This one has better on-center feel and the load-up behavior is a bit stronger. But even fully loaded with the fastback, this is still a sub 2,500 pound car, which is maybe 50 pounds lighter than that NC1. So let's drive this first as the baseline and then see if that NC1 can still hold its own. Although you can get an NA or NB for less than $10,000, it is such a slow car, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a really good condition one for less than $10,000. Now, that's just my opinion, but I think NC is definitely, by far, the value play in the Miata world. But obviously, this ND3 is very nice. It costs a lot for a reason. The interior feels very high quality for this type of car, and considering how light it is, all the materials and build quality are really excellent. We still have physical knobs for climate control and a widescreen infotainment system, which is touch sensitive. It's definitely sleeker and higher resolution than the outgoing ND2 infotainment. Track mode for the traction control system, which is new for the ND3. No drive modes here. Non-adjustable steering weights. You can't do anything fancy with the LSD. It's just you and the car, the way a Miata always has been, and in my opinion, always should be. Stock exhaust. Let's see how this thing actually sounds with the window cracked. Miata engines are not known to be the loudest or most exciting. A little bit of tire chirp going into second there. This is not a super grippy, hunkered down sports car. It's meant to be playful, whimsical, with lower limits. It's a car that's meant for the beginning driving enthusiast. It's a very approachable platform with a low learning curve. This steering is so good for an EPS. The on-center feel is phenomenal. Even with this soft suspension, the front responds not immediately, but quickly enough for a totally stock car. The engine makes a good sound, not a great sound. I've said this in so many different ND2 and ND3 reviews, but I wish it had more induction note. Six-speed manual, so slick, so easy to use. Short, stubby gear lever. It is struggling a little bit here at elevation, this little naturally aspirated engine. This chassis can handle quite a bit more power. I think 230, 240 would be the sweet spot. There's some body roll. When you brake hard, there is some dive. And it squats when you accelerate, especially from low gears. But that's the charm of the Miata in stock form. It's an energetic little puppy dog. It's not hardcore. You can make it hardcore. I've driven plenty of track prepped ND2s, but in stock form it's just such a easygoing little sports car, especially if you drive with the top down on a sunny day. And the way they've retuned this LSD makes the car feel more stable on corner entry, which does in fact work. I remember one of the first times I drove an ND1, it really caught me off guard. The rear just wanted to kick out when you lift off the throttle. This ND3 has a much more stable behavior. And with the club trims, Brembo brakes, and Recaro seats, this thing will hold up pretty well to track work as well. These Recaros are not that aggressive. They're actually just the right balance for a mostly street-driven, occasionally track-driven car. They're manually adjustable, but they are reclinable, and they're easy to get in and out of. Driving this car at 5/10 is still fun because it's communicative. The steering talks to you. It's a joy to row through the gears, even if you're not banging off the rev limiter. Downshifting is just a joy. I do wish the car had a slightly lighter flywheel. I think in stock form it just feels slightly lazy. Oh yeah, this engine's gasping for breath. But once you hit corners, that's where this car comes alive. So good, even in stock form. But at over $40,000, is it worth it? I mean, this particular car even has the appearance package, I think, with the nice door sills, Miata oil cap, a couple of other little nice touches. But overall, despite how fun this car is, it's a lot of money for what you get, at least from a performance standpoint. So now let's hop into that NC1 and see if you're really just better off buying the older car and modifying it to your tastes. All right, we're now in the 2008 NC1 Miata. The owner, Matt, has done a few mods to this, full list in the video description. We've got Sakebomb Garage long stroke Öhlins DFE suspension, a Progress front sway bar, Whiteline rear sway bar, G-loc R8 brake pads, Motul RBF660 fluid, and some stainless brake lines. Pretty basic stuff, but I'm glad that Matt did not skimp on the suspension. So the NC1 is powered by a 2-liter naturally aspirated inline 4-cylinder engine. It makes 167 horsepower and 140 pound-feet of torque. Redline for the NC1 is only around 7,000 RPM, whereas the NC2 and NC3 engines will rev to about 7,500. But this car is a bit heavier than the ND3, even with the RF. Around 2,500 pounds, but still, that's very, very lightweight. I love what he's done with the steering wheel. It really does a good job at addressing the stock NC steering wheel's very thin rim. This has a much meatier feel in the hand, and I like this shift knob as well. We've got an exhaust on this, which does drone quite a bit at around 3,000 RPM, but it does really open up the sound of this otherwise pretty tame 4-cylinder engine. Let me crack the window here to demonstrate that. It's pretty damn loud for a Miata. The throttle pedal has a pretty long travel, and so you can really fine-tune your throttle input here. Oh my gosh. Soft top is so loud. I think it's ripped in multiple places, so the air is just forcing itself into the cabin. But already, what a fun little car. It's raw, it's nimble, it communicates with you. This hydraulic steering rack, in my opinion, feels just as good as the ND3 steering rack. This actually has a bit more feedback about the road surface, but the on-center feel is not as strong, it's not as tight. There's a little bit more slop just off-center. So pros and cons, but overall, I would say it's just as enjoyable. You do feel the relative lack of engine power here. Not quite as eager to rev, and with the 5-speed the gear ratios are a little bit more awkward. If you shift at redline, you don't always end up in the power band in that next higher gear. That's not really a problem with the ND3. The handling of this car with the Sakebomb Öhlins long stroke coilovers and the sway bars is very nice. It feels a bit soft, but that's okay because this is a street driven car. Matt said he does track it as well, but not frequently. And in the canyons, it definitely feels a lot more planted than a stock NC Miata. The damping quality is just so much better. But wow, this exhaust is loud. Cruising along here, the interior is definitely nowhere near as good as the ND3. Cheap, hard plastics everywhere. Even just the shape of the buttons looks a lot less premium, but it's functional. You still have physical controls for everything. Obviously no infotainment back in 2008. And in terms of comfort and ergonomics, outside of the lack of tech, this is just as easy to drive around, to cruise around in. Very light clutch. I think the ND3 shifter feels a little bit tighter, but this one might actually feel a little bit more mechanical. But it is a noisy car. I wish we could drive one that had no squeaks and rattles and a soft top with no tears, but they're pretty hard to come by nowadays. Soft top convertibles are just known to not hold up over time. Same goes for the NC, the NB, NA, the S2000, early generation Boxsters and Z3s. Unless you take really good care of your soft top, you're probably gonna have issues 10, 15 years into the car's lifetime. So that's where the RF of the ND3 is so nice. You can still have your top down driving pleasure, but with the top up, you get so much more refinement than any of these soft top cars. Saturday afternoon traffic here. I got a good enough taste of this car. It handles great. The exhaust is too loud for my liking, so I'd probably go with something quieter. Matt spent money on just the right mods in terms of improving this car's weaknesses. Sakebomb Öhlins long stroke coilovers, sway bars, some basic brake upgrades, and you're basically there. So if I try to quantify it, I would say you have 85 to 90% of the stock ND3 Club's driving dynamics and performance at barely over 1/3 the price. What's not to love? Parts are readily available for these cars. They're cheap to own, they're cheap to run, and they're just a blast in the canyons. Now that's floored. Come on, little engine, you can do it. Oh, this handles so well in the high-speed corners. NC1 Miata with some choice mods. If the engine just had a bit more top end, I actually think this might be 100% as good. So really what you're missing out by getting an NC1 versus an ND3 is the refinement. Outside of that, they're so similar in terms of driving dynamics and driving pleasure. So do you think it's worth spending the extra on the ND3 if it's not going to be your only car? If it's your second car, it doesn't even matter. Should you just save the almost $25,000 to $30,000, get an NC1 and just modify it to your liking? Let me know down in the comments. A big shout out to the owners, Eric and Matt. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.